Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hey Rob, it's Diana.
Hi Rob, it's Jackie.
Hi Jackie, hi Diana, how you doing?
Hi Rob.
Good.
Well, for those of you new to the show, ABA Inside Track is a podcast where we talk about behavior analytic literature around a specific topic. This week we will be discussing AAC, or augmentative and alternative communication. Now, a lot of people think of AAC as being iPads or technology that you would use to output speech. That's one specific use of AAC. We're going to be talking about two types of AAC in our articles this week. One is going to be kind of the low-tech version, and one's going to be the high-tech version.
What do you mean by low-tech and high-tech, Rob?
I mean low-tech, like stones and various wheels and gears.
An abacus.
Yes, and then the other uses some sort of hyperspatial quantum calculations, Jackie, of course. Yes. No, I just mean low-tech, like pencil, paper. So PECS, Picture Exchange Communication System, would be an example of low-tech because it uses laminated pieces of paper and Velcro and a binder.
I love Velcro.
It is great. Or what was the term? If you can't get the trademark for
loop.
Velcro, you're hook and loop.
Hook and loop closure.
And then high tech would be something like a voice output device. So something that you would use on a computer or application like Proloquo, Go Talk. And then you could usually people use those on, say, an iPad or an iPad mini these days is kind of the cost-effective computer or tablet alternative.
Or a Samsung Galaxy. Let's just not talk about eye products here, guys.
Just don't use the one that explodes.
I like the Samsung Galaxy because it has Gorilla Glass. So if I
that's
throw
pretty
it
nice.
against the wall, it does not break.
Well, now let's hear from our sponsor, Mr. Samsung himself.
Oh, kids.
These Samsung phones sure are great. Bye. Bye, Mr. Samsung. Thanks for stopping by.
You just have to represent all products.
I'm sorry, you're right.
And
You're
the
right.
Dynavox, which is huge.
Right, yep,
It's
the
like
mini
the
Merc.
biggest box ever. Yeah.
It is huge.
Are those still like thousands of dollars, or do they
Yes, they
realize
are.
we need to cut the price of
No,
these
they still
items?
are. Mhm.
Why? What do they do that an iPad or the Samsung Galaxy does not do? Here's our new sponsor, Dynavox. Hi, Mr. Dynavox.
They're generally pretty well protected. They have like big cases, and they can stand up, so you can sort of prop it up and look at it.
Those are things I think an iPad can do.
It's already pre-programmed.
So it does, you don't have to program it necessarily, and it stands up better. Okay.
I think there are times when it can be useful to have a separate speech device that's really allocated specifically for speech production versus an iPad that might sometimes be used for AAC and sometimes for gaming or trade-ins. I think that can be confusing for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And this also has touch and eye tracking basis of devices.
Oh, that's nice.
So that would but that would be talking about like a really fancy Dynavox. So anything with eye tracking, I could see that being $1,000. So that's high tech, low tech, AAC, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We'll be going over two articles. The first is Effects on Communicative Requesting and Speech Development of the Picture Exchange Communication System in Children with Characteristics of Autism by Ganz and Simpson from the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, 2004. And the second are High Tech, AAC, Increasing the Vocalizations of Individuals with Autism During Intervention with a Speech-Generating Device by, there's a lot of people involved in this article.
Yeah, everyone had a hand in this one.
Gavarter, O'Reilly, Kuhn, Mills, Ferguson, Watkins, Sigafus, Lang, Rodyeski, Lancioni, Mickey Mouse, Donald. Wait, no, just Lancioni.
Cruz, and McDonald.
No, we weren't involved. Lancioni is the last one. We're just fooling, and that's from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, 2016. Whoa,
Yeah,
it's so recent, hot off the press.
that's right. Because once you go over 6 authors, it's at all every time you list it. So if you have more than 6 people that you want to include, you might as well include everybody anyway. Because no one's ever going to get listed except the very first person.
Searchable though, get your name, your name in print.
Totally.
It's still pretty cool. why don't we start with our low-tech device? So, Diana, you were going to take the lead on that article, but first, could you tell us a little bit about picture exchange communication system, or just general, AAC as it relates to the article?
Sure, I can. Augmentative and alternative communication systems, which are AAC. Now, we recognize, first of all, that we did miss AAC month because it was in October.
What? We're the worst.
I know. Well, we've actually been planning this one for kind of a while, and I think we started planning for it back in October, but we missed actual production of it.
Everybody stop your podcast machines, wait till October, listen to this episode, and no, you know what? We hit it. Yes, we did it, everybody. Great job.
October 2017 is what we're shooting for.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so just don't listen to this till October 2017, and we're all good. If you're listening to it when this actually publishes, we missed it, like Diana said. But if you're listening to this almost a year from now, we got it.
Nailed it.
It's October, and it's
AAC month.
It's AAC month. We did it.
Happy Halloween.
Time machines.
Yeah.
That's funny.
But we didn't want to wait until October 2017 to talk about it because it's a cool topic. And we had some listeners who were interested in it, and I'm interested in it too.
Me too.
So that's why we're talking about it now. There are several different things that could fall into this category. AAC is really any type of additional means of communicating your wants, needs, thoughts, or feelings in a way other than vocal or written speech. So that could include using sign language. It could include using a picture exchange communication system or PECS system. It could include using some type of speech generating device like an iPad or a Dynavox, which we were just mentioning. Or it could include using some type of pictorial verbal repair system as well that does not involve an actual exchange of pictures. So the two that we're going to focus on today are the PECS system and then the speech generating device. And the Ganz and Simpson article that I'm going to review focuses specifically on the PECS exchange system. Now, another thing that I think is important that we go over with everyone as we're entering into talking about PECS is that it stands for Picture Exchange Communication System. And PECS is the whole system. It's the abbreviation for the whole system, right? So it's the PECS way. However, what do you guys think that one of those individual little symbols that you hand over is called?
A peck?
Wrong.
Everybody calls it that, though.
It ain't right. It's not a peck. It is a symbol.
Pickled pepper.
Don't pick a peck of pickled pecks. It's a symbol.
It is a symbol.
Yes, so you hand over the symbol, or you exchange the symbol or the picture, but PECS is not a plural form of one little picture, meaning one little peck. That's wrong.
That's wrong. Symbol.
Okay.
Another thing I think that we should point out, too, is that if you are not using the phases as outlined in the picture exchange communication system, phases 1 through 6?
Yeah, the article just has 1 to 4.
This article goes to 4. Yeah.
I think there's 6.
I believe there are beyond the 4.
Yeah. But if you're not doing them, those phases, then you cannot call what you're doing the picture exchange communication system. It has to be called something different. Because PECS is copyrighted by Frost and Bundy. Bundy and Frost, sorry. Bundy and Frost.
But that's a really good thing to point out.
And
And
it's technically not.
Yeah, and
PECS, if you're not doing the phases.
Yeah, and the phases are a little bit complicated and require really specific prompting and error correction procedures that are not necessarily the same as what is used in the rest of applied behavior analysis.
Right. Typically, people should call them picture-based systems.
And
PBS? PBS, if you want to have an acronym. But they're picture-based.
Of course we want to have an acronym. It's ABA.
Picture-based systems and not PECS.
So picture-based system is the umbrella term for any communication that uses symbols or pictures.
Symbols or pictures.
Whereas PECS is the specific copyright or trademark of...
It's a program. It's the actual system of the phases.
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
I know they don't go through all 6, where you're going to go through the phases.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm going to go up through 4, which they talked about in this article.
Okay, but not right now. It's just
Give
a
me
teaser.
a chance to set the mood.
Okay. Sorry. I don't want to harsh your buzz.
All right, so Ganz and Simpson do a nice job in this article of going through the first 4 phases of the PECS system and look at how the participants in the study do at acquiring the skills within those 4 phases, as well as additional effects for those participants on their overall vocal communication and speech production as well. So there's 2 components here, which is kind of nice. Before they get into the meat of the article, they talk some about the advantages of using a picture exchange system over perhaps other types of AAC. So they make a comparison between aided and unaided AAC systems. And unaided AAC system doesn't have additional visual supports in it. So the best example of that would be sign language. And an aided AAC system has additional visual supports, so that would be like a PECS system. And they say that there's a lot of advantages of using an aided visual communication system, including that it could be understood by more people. So if you're out in the community, let's say you know 200 signs, well, most people know 0 signs, or they might know more.
Yeah.
Or 1 bathroom. Turtle.
Yeah, maybe.
Everybody loves turtle.
Is that like put your little thumb out?
You put one hand on top of the other, and then your thumbs move.
Like a turtle. Sort of.
Oh,
Like
that's
a turtle.
awesome.
Turtle.
That is pretty awesome.
It's the first one I ever learned.
Good job.
Thanks.
Someone I know who is not from the U.S. thought that our symbol for pig, our sign language ASL symbol for pig, is really weird because it's like you put your hand under your chin and like move it like up
It's
and
like
down.
a swear word in Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's a really weird sign, and she says that in her British sign language, pig is just you like make a little like movement with your hand over your nose like you have a snout. I was like, yeah, that makes so much more sense. I have no idea why ours is so weird. So there are as well differences in different sign languages. So if you knew ASL and you went to Britain, you might accidentally swear at someone when you tried to say pig. But if you're using a visual supported system, then everyone would see the symbol that you're handing over, whether they speak English or not, or know any type of ASL or not, then they would know what you mean. The fine motor requirement for PECS system is only handing something over, so there's less of a fine motor component as there is in sign language. So that's another advantage. And they also list that there's no pre-attending skills needed, so no need to really focus on those types of attending skills that we often do in behavior analysis. You can really just focus on the picture exchange. I feel like that might be up for debate. And then no need to do a lot of initial work on instruction following. You can really just jump right in and work on the picture exchange. So those were some advantages that they listed. I know we referenced Bondi and Frost earlier, so it's Andy Bondi and Lori Frost developed the PECS system, and they've had varying different manuals produced, but one of the main ones was in 2001, where they really outline everything, and they also reference in there that if you're working with individuals with ASD, a good place to start with your communication system is with requesting, because that has a really nice built-in reinforcer into it. You're getting something at the end of every request, whereas commenting, the reinforcer is often more of a social component, which may not be as motivating for individuals with ASD. So that's why the PECS system starts where it does, with simple requesting, and then moves on to more complex arrangements from there. However, there is overall still somewhat limited research done in this area. There's enough that it's certainly supported, but there's not maybe as much as one might expect. So the article that I have is from 2004, and at that point in time, they had a handful that they were referencing, but they really weren't that many. So that was part of the focus of this study as well, was just to show, yes, the picture exchange communication system does work, and these are the results that you can get when you use it. So that's what they were looking at here. They had 3 participants in the study. Their ages ranged from 3 to 5, and they had either a diagnosis of autism or some type of developmental delay. Gail was 5 with a diagnosis of autism. She spoke about 5 to 10 words total. She engaged in echolalia and really had very little labeling or instruction following. Ramon was 7. He had developmental delay diagnosis. He spoke about around 30 words, but had really limited functional use of those words and also engaged in echolalia. And then Ben was 3 years old. He had developmental delay diagnosis as well as a speech impairment diagnosis. He spoke about 20 different words, but again had limited functional independent use of those words. So what they were doing for their independent variable was implementation of the PECS protocol, the first 4 phases of that. Phase 1 involved basic picture exchange. So generally there's one symbol on the front of the book, and the child is taught to take that symbol off and hand it over. I say child, it really could be anyone. You could use this type of system with children or adults. Phase 2 was increasing the distance between the child and the book. and also, even in phase 1, there was an increased distance component between the child and the adult. Phase 2, the child had to go find the book, find the symbol in the book, and then take it to the adult in order to engage in the exchange. Phase 3 added in the component of discrimination between the pictures, so initially discriminating just between a preferred and non-preferred picture, and then eventually moving up to an array of 6 different pictures they had to discriminate between. And then phase 4 involved backward chaining in adding in the I want part of the strip. So the child then needed to learn to put the I want on the removable strip on the bottom of the PECS book, then the symbol of what they wanted, take the whole strip off, take it over to someone, and then point at the I want and the strip part. In this part, there was an opportunity for the instructor to label what was on the strip, but the child was not required to give the vocalization. They just, for the exchange, they could access the item. So those were kind of the 4 basic phases, and there were criteria, of course, to move between the different phases. Then there were 3 different dependent variables that they were looking at here. The first was the overall independence with the PECS system at the current phase for each of the participants. The second dependent variable was the number of intelligible words spoken. And the third was the presence, so just like plus or minus, of any non-word vocalizations. So they were certainly expecting to see an increase in independent PECS usage. And then they were hoping to see an increase in intelligible words spoken and sort of expecting to see an inverse correlation between the number of words spoken and the amount of non-word vocalizations.
It's a good hypothesis.
It was, but did it play out? We shall see.
Bow, bow, bow.
And that's sort of the given. I think they even mentioned in the introduction the idea that, well, using alternate forms of communication is a great way to increase vocalizations. I mean, every baby book puts
Everybody
that in.
says
That's why
that,
you should
right.
do sign language with your baby, because
Yeah.
it teaches them language a lot sooner, and they can communicate better, so they're less grumpy, and then they're going to learn language, vocal language really
babies.
quickly. But it was nice. I mean, I guess it's a 2004 study, but we should probably prove that is a thing,
Right.
rather than we assume it is. So
Yeah.
let's say it is.
Well, even in my study, they look at that too.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, we're still looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Even today in
I think that's
2016.
Unless you're listening to this in 2020, that case, we already did it. Way back when.
It's checked off. I think that's still a common misconception that if you're going to introduce sign language or PECS system, that you're not going to see an increase in vocalizations. And the research has not supported that thus far.
No.
So that's really important for everyone to know and to be able to reference back to in the literature, I think. So because it can be fantastic to increase overall functional communication using an AAC system, and not necessarily going to deter additional vocal speech from developing. So it's good for everyone to know that and to be able to just say that with affirmation to any families who might be concerned. 2 interesting points about this study that I noted here when I got to this section. All right, so first of all, they talk about the design, and they said, well, the closest thing that we have to defining this design is a changing criterion design. And I was super excited, and I circled it, and I put a whole bunch of exclamation points next to it, because as you guys know, changing criterion design is one of my favorites.
You do love it.
Yeah.
You really
Right?
love it.
And
You want to
nobody-
use it whenever you can.
Nobody
Right?
does, though.
We talked a while ago, and maybe our very first episode, about the cumulative record and how it's the duck-billed platypus of experimental design.
Right.
And I said changing criterion design is the unicorn of behavior analytic design because it's so rare. And so I was so excited. But then when I flipped over to the graph, I was like, no,
It's not.
this is not a changing criterion design, folks, because they didn't make any modifications to the criterion. It's just different phases.
Right. Yeah, it's not. They fooled you.
Yeah, so that was disappointing. And then the other wacko thing that happened here is that there is no baseline.
0 baseline.
Yeah.
One thing I want to just point out, too, is the graphs. When we talk about the graphs, the y-axis is different for each of them, and one of them goes up to 120%, which I love. Because
that kid was trying so hard.
Right, above and beyond every opportunity. I love that.
I did not notice that.
Yeah, it's in figure 1 when they're looking at PECS proficiency. Everyone else goes to 100%, but the first one, Gail, goes to 120%. And then some of them only go to 70%, which...
Yeah, you should really make those uniform.
Yeah.
But I do love the 120%. That was like the first thing I noticed, and I was like, what are you doing? But I thought that was awesome. So nobody got to 120%, unfortunately. But it is
maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
All right. They are very upfront about the no baseline thing.
Yeah.
And they say in Bondi and Frost, they don't start with a baseline, so we didn't start with a baseline. It seems like they could have just added a couple little baseline points there.
Maybe just 3.
Right? Just 3 little designs. Because right now, there's no reversal. There's no changing criterion. There's no baseline. So we really don't have a great example of experimental control.
We don't. It's actually, there is no experimental control here shown at all.
No.
0. But we see some replication.
Yeah.
But that's about it. I mean, that doesn't really tell us anything.
No.
Is it a staggered baseline?
No.
Well, then.
Well, I guess
Jackie's counting.
Yeah, I was counting. So Gail had 7 in phase 1. Ramon had 5. Ben had 5. Yeah, there's 2. If they would have organized it in that way, maybe. But they didn't, so I don't think we can really use that as a go-ahead. But
so that's a little bit of a bummer. Why don't we talk about what we do know from the results? Is that good for you guys?
Sure.
Yes.
Moving on to results. I just walked you guys through what the phases were, right? So they used, prompting and reinforcement to teach each of those phases and then moved on to the next phase as criteria were met. What they found is that for teaching PECS, everyone learned really quite quickly, honestly, each of the 4 phases. So overall, it was between 20 and 29 sessions for each of the participants to move through the 4 phases. So that amounted to, I think, around 300 or so trials.
Okay, not horrible.
It's not horrible at all. It's actually really quite quick. So I found that pretty impressive. Overall, it was a pretty nice, stable rate of increase in independence across the 4 phases with some dips around phase 4, the introduction of phase 4, because that is more challenging.
Yeah.
Everyone seemed to do quite well with the discrimination component of phase 3. And it's been my personal experience that many kids can get tripped up there. But for these 2 participants, they didn't seem to stop them at all. They just kept rocking and rolling.
Yeah, it doesn't look like anything changed when they went to phase 3. It was just
they got this.
I'm still going awesome.
Yeah, so that was great for them. Despite the issues that we have here with experimental control, these participants seem to learn quite well what to do within the PECS system and were requesting independently in more and more complex ways as the phases progressed. So that was great. All right, so for average words per trial, everyone saw an increase that happened either during phase 3 or phase 4. So for Gail, she had overall pretty low levels of independent words per trial across phases 1, 2, and 3. And then at phase 4, it just shot up. So they were starting to see really like 4 or 5 words per trial, which is great. For Ramon, he saw an initial modest increase in phase 3. And then again, it really shot up in phase 4 to around 4 words per trial. And then for Ben, again, his results look a lot like Ramon's in that there was a slight increase in phase 3 and then a much higher increase in phase 4 to like 3 to 4 words per trial, which is really fantastic.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that they were looking at was the non-word vocalizations per session, which again, they sort of anticipated that as independent speech went up, that those would go down. And they did not find that. Everyone was like all over the map for the non-word vocalization. Right. So Gail's sort of decreased over time. Ramon stayed relatively low and stable over time. And then Ben's actually increased over time. I don't know exactly what to make of those data, but that's what they saw. They also gave us some nice, I thought, just to sort of flesh out this whole study here, they gave us some nice additional information on what types of vocalizations and words they were hearing within each session.
That was nice, actually.
Yeah, so for each, they gave us what they said during the first session and the last session of each phase. So to summarize that, for Gail, in her first session, phase 1, she said nothing. And then her last session of phase 4, so the end of the entire thing, she said, I want Frulu, which meant Fruit Loops. As an example. She said other things too. For Ramon, in his first session of phase 1, he said nothing. In his last session of phase 4, an example is, I want balloon white. And then for Ben, in his first session of phase 1, he said Lily Poo, which meant Winnie the Pooh. And in his last session of phase 4, he said Lelo, which meant yellow. I want markers, that's markers. So everyone saw some really nice increases in the length of their phrases, as well as for Ramon and Ben, they started adding in some additional descriptors like color words.
Yeah.
As well. So that was pretty exciting. And again, this was really only over the course of 20 to 29 sessions. And that's could have been, we don't actually know how much time that was, but let's say they did one session a day, then that was like 4 to 6 weeks. And I find that pretty exciting.
Yeah, especially I think some of the other averages that you would see. I think they cite a couple that are many times higher in terms of length of, or number of sessions, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So the results that we see here are really promising. Now, of course, we'd like to see something with a little bit more experimental control.
Or any.
Even any experimental control would be good. They also report some anecdotal generalizations saying that Ben, was able to do this with his mom and that he started using PECS independently in the classroom, but they didn't take any data on that. And we also don't have any procedural integrity data on the implementation of the PECS protocol either. So all of those would be really good additional pieces to have. But what we do see here are some lovely increases in a spontaneous vocal speech in concurrence with implementation of the PECS system.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's some cool stuff.
Yeah, clinically, this is right on par, right? So as a researcher, you're like, oh no functional control. But as a clinician, you're like, wow, this is nice.
Yeah. So in no way did using the picture exchange system limit the vocal speech. It created most likely more opportunities for it to occur and more of that social interaction, which is inherent to the PECS system. And one of the reasons why I think it's so great.
Yeah. I want to just say something real fast. If you guys are interested in the picture communication exchange system, or if you want to give parents more information, there's a really awesome book, and it's by Bondi and Frost, but it was published in 2011, and it's called A Picture's Worth, PECS and Other Visual Communication Strategies in Autism. It was published in Bethesda, Maryland by Woodbine House, and I think it's around like $20, but it's written for parents and new students.
Nice.
Of applied behavior analysis, and I love it. It goes through all of the phases. It talks about low tech, high tech, and really easy to understand language. It talks to you about how you can set up these programs, how you're going to take data, what you're going to do after you finish the 6 phases. It's really nice. It's a really nice complement book. You can read it in a night if you're excited. So, yeah, check it out.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we can
the
put a
new
link up.
binge watching is reading an entire book in a night.
We can put a link up for that
right?
on
that's good
the
stuff.
page.
Yeah, it's a really good
People
book.
are interested. Great. Well,
All right. That's all I got to say about that.
thanks a lot, Diana.
Yep,
Appreciate it.
You bet.
So we're going to go from our low tech to our high tech. But before we do that, one of the nice things about our show, other than our melodious tones and great research, well, we didn't do the research, but great discussion of the research, is that we are CE providers here at ABA Inside Track. So if you are listening to this and would like to apply for continuing education credits, you need to listen to the episode and send in 2 code words that will intersperse throughout the episode. And the first one we're going to have tonight is icicle, because it is winter time. At least here in Massachusetts, it's winter time.
But we don't have any icicles.
As of this recording, we do not have any icicles, but since you may be listening to this at any time, you might be sitting under an icicle.
Watch out!
You
Be
might
careful. Those things could be murder weapons.
making an icicle. Who knows? Icicle. ICICLE. We think is how you spell it.
Seems about right. Just give it a shot.
That's awesome.
Icicle. And with that, let's move into the realm of the high tech with supercomputer, VR. Wait, no, not all that. Even though it's 2016. No, Jaggie's giving me a face. No,
Like, what's that?
no,
I
I'm
know
kidding.
what you're talking about.
I was kidding around. No, we're not that. This article was not that high tech.
Oh.
But we're going to talk about looking at increasing vocalizations with a speech generating device. So kind of the other side of the vocalization coin, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I love here that they also have an acronym, Speech Generating Device, or SGD.
You bet it.
Whoa, whoa. I love it when everything has an acronym. Similar to the research or to the claims of parents using the picture exchange communication system, a lot of parents will decline using a speech generating device because they have this feeling that it's going to hinder vocal speech.
Mm-hmm.
But there is actually a lot of research suggesting that the speech generating device may help with the acquisition of speech, but using it alone may not facilitate vocal speech. So if you only use the speech generating device, we may not see an increase in vocalizations, independent vocalizations anyway.
Yeah.
Especially if a student has limited vocal imitation skills. So if they haven't demonstrated vocal imitation, it is less likely that they're going to emit independent vocalizations when using the speech-generated device alone. Make sense?
That does make sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have worked with families that are really gung-ho to move straight to the SGD.
Uh-huh.
And I just have to put in my 2 cents
Sure, do it.
now for that. So I'm taking this information from my speech pathologist friends.
Oh,
So,
great. We should have invited one next time.
Yeah.
Why, here's a speech pathologist friend right now. Mr. Samsung, you've returned.
That's funny.
One of the things that I think is so great about using the PECS system or some type of exchange system is that there's a built-in piece of actual social interaction there. You have to go over to someone, and usually we require eye contact, although in the article they're saying that you don't have to do that. But,
Right.
You tap someone on the shoulder and you hand them a picture, you hand them a strip, and then there's an opportunity for a social exchange there where the person says the name and then they wait, and you, the PECS user, have the opportunity to attempt to say the speech. So all of that's really built in, and I think it reinforces the social nature of communication. So you can't just take your PECS symbol off and drop it, hold it up in the air and drop it down on the ground and expect the Twizzlers to come to you, right? There is...
I wish.
I know.
I would never leave my couch.
You just keep dropping them on the floor.
Yeah.
Like, no one's coming. So there's a real social exchange piece there, and I always highlight that to families that that's something that we want to teach first and foremost, is that if you want something, you have to go find someone and have a way to tell them what you want, whether that's through sign or through speech or through pointing or any of those means, or through picture exchange. And moving through the PECS system gives you a lot of opportunity to practice that and really learn that it's a social communication piece. So if you skip all of that and jump right into using speech generating device, there's not that physical exchange of an item. So you feel like you miss out on the opportunity to get that eye contact and sometimes have the opportunity to imitate what the other person is saying. And this article does a good job of allowing for that, but without building in the opportunities like they did here. I think, like you're saying, like you can miss out on promoting vocal speech or the social interaction side of communication. Right. If you're just pressing the button over and over again to an empty room.
Well, nothing
then
will
you missed
happen.
the point.
Right.
Yeah.
There are some evidence-based practices to teach vocal language that are behaviorally based, and those include reinforcing vocalizations differentially, as well as a prompt delay. So those have been shown to be effective in increasing vocalizations and vocal language for individuals across the board diagnosed with an ASD. Yeah. But they actually haven't looked at those interventions combined with a speech-generating device, which is crazy.
Yeah, that is actually surprising.
Right?
Yeah.
So they say, these things work, but will they work, or will they work better compared with a speech-generating device? So that is what they're going to do in this article, which is kind of neat. Yeah, which I'm pretty excited about telling you. This one's a little dicey. We're gonna walk through it.
There's a lot going on.
Nice and slow for me and for you. And we're gonna see what they did. So they had 4 participants. They were all boys. I love their table. Man, I love participant tables. I really do. Yeah. They help. So then you have all 4 participants. You have their ages. So they range in age from 4 years old to 7 years, 9 months. Then they have their CARS score. They have their Vineland score. They have their Vineland communication age equivalent. They did an assessment on if they could engage in imitation, either full imitation or partial imitation, to assess that vocal imitation skill, because what they were looking for was participants that had limited vocal imitation, so that they could then assess, would this be good for those types of participants, because we haven't had that study. We haven't done that yet. So I love that. I thought that was great. Yeah, so they did a whole bunch of stuff. And then based on those experimental assessments, they had those 4 kids, Derek, Adolfo, Ricardo, and Addie. I want to go dancing with all of them. And they also, all of the participants had some experience using high-tech devices such as GoTalk, Seen and Heard, and Autismate. I haven't heard that one.
No, I'm ready to GoTalk.
I have.
That's good, because most of them had used GoTalk, Autismate, and the Lamp Words for Life. So I've heard of most of those. They made sure that all of them had at least some experience with a speech-generating device and AAC iPad applications. So they knew what they were doing on the speech-generating device for the most part. Yeah. They could request preferred items. Generally.
Gotcha. Good. Yeah. Which was different than my study.
Yes.
This one they had no prior experience.
Right. So here they weren't teaching them that. They wanted to make sure they already could do that.
Just looking at the vocalization.
Right. They're looking at the vocalization, acquisition, and not necessarily can you use a speech generating device. This took place in the participants' homes, which I love. I always love it when it's more ecological, the natural setting. And graduate students were the interventionists. They had sessions around 2 to 4 times per week. The first thing they did was to identify a highly preferred item and a moderately preferred item, which I thought was interesting here because they did a 2-stage preference assessment. So they made a list of highly preferred items, including toys, play, food, and drinks. Yeah. And they put them all together. Right. Which is typically we don't do. No. Right? I totally get it, though. Because they're looking for the most highly preferred item out of all of those categories. But when I first read that, I was like, what? You don't do that. But they did. And it makes sense when you read through it again, because they're looking for the most highly preferred out of all of those.
Right. And the reasoning why we don't typically combine those is that generally the food is going to win out over other things, right? Yeah. And you might lose the relative preference of some toys over other toys because the food just sort of washes everything else out. Right. But that's not what they got.
Yeah, that's okay. It's not what they had. It's not what they found.
Most of them are toys, right?
Yeah, Derek loved Slinky. I do too, Derek. Don't worry. Adolfo loved a Capri Sun juice box. Also love that. I wonder what flavor it was. I wish they would be like very berry flavor.
Fruit punch.
I thought it was orange.
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe I just chose that.
In your mind, it was
In my
orange.
mind. In my
Ricardo-
mind's eye.
Yeah, Ricardo chose an iPad, and this was different than his speech generating device. So this one had games on it, and Addie chose an Android phone with a Pocoyo video.
Pocoyo.
Pocoyo.
I don't know what that is.
Is he a big head?
It's really adorable. It's a Spanish little show.
Oh,
and
is it a kid's show?
Oh yeah,
That's probably why I haven't seen it.
He wears a blue outfit and a blue hat, and then he has his best friend is like a pink elephant named Ellie, I think.
Oh,
it might not be the name of the elephant, but it's a pink elephant.
Okay,
it's cute. It's like a claymation kind of thing.
Okay, and then they also had a least preferred item, which was still selected at least once during this assessment to use during differential reinforcement. So they had the most highly preferred item, and then they had the least preferred item. So all of the participants used an iPad or an iPad mini as the speech generating device, and they just had a single screen with one large speech output button. I kind of like that. I like imagining it. I wish they had a picture of it.
Yeah.
Just one giant
button with an image on it of the preferred item using Go Talk Now. So everyone had used Go Talk Now, so that's the one that they used. So they just had a big button with a picture of like the iPad or the Capri Sun.
No discrimination needed. Just
right?
smack the device.
And then they had a text caption underneath it, and it was programmed with a speech output matching the caption. So I press it, it says Sun for Capri Sun or something of the nature. I like that. And they made efforts to ensure that the speech output included one sound, that most of the time the initial sound, that the participant had reported to vocalize or imitate on occasion, but not always. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, because they wanted something that they could produce.
Right. Yeah.
This is not unlike those big buttons.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Staples That Was Easy button.
Because before everyone had iPads, we used to have those big buttons that you could program to say a particular thing.
They say phrases.
Yeah, and you would press it and then it would talk for you. We haven't talked about that as an AAC device, but it is also one. That's why I'm just saying it now.
I think you only see those, though, nowadays you probably see them more with individuals with physical disabilities. So, the limited mobility.
Yeah, like the buttons or switches. Yeah.
So one thing to note, though, if the participant had not been reported to emit the first sound in the preferred item label, they picked an alternative name. So Derek had been reported to emit this sound in Slinky, so they used Slinky. But Adolfo, his target word was sun, because he had not been reported to say the k for Capri or j for juice. So they picked for sun. So for Ricardo, he had not been reported to emit the initial sound in iPad. And they couldn't identify an alternative label that began with the or the, how are you going to call the iPad? But he had been reported to emit the sound in iPad. Therefore, he chose that as the target word.
That works.
And Pocoyo, oh, I did it, was selected as a speech output for Addie instead of phone because she could do the
he.
P sound, but not the f sound.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So they, again, are only looking at vocalizations for the dependent measure. So they're looking at independent vocalizations, vocal initiations, and vocal approximations in full words.
Yeah. And that makes sense if they already have experience with the speech generating device.
Right.
And it's just the one button. They weren't as concerned with their independent responding in that regard. Right. So they could have just taken a little data to confirm that for us, but we have to take them at their word. Yeah.
They probably have it somewhere. And I bet if we email them, they would give it to us. Yeah. Everybody email them now. I'm just kidding. So independent vocalizations included either the full target word or the approximation, and they were considered independent if they were not prompted by a vocal model from the interventionists. So that means that they were considered prompted if they occurred within 5 seconds of a vocal model. So then they looked at vocal initiations. So vocal initiations were defined as an independent target vocalization that occurred within 5 seconds of the speech generating device being placed between the child and the preferred item, but not before the beginning of the speech output. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
And vocal approximations in full words were those acceptable sounds that we talked about earlier. So cool. They had pretty good IOA.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. And then they went on to run the experiment. They had a baseline. Yay! So here...
Start at the very beginning.
They really did.
Baseline's the place to start.
Ooh, it's like a Mary Poppins field right here.
The Sound of Music.
Oh, I don't know.
It's still Julie Andrews, so it all works out.
I hate musicals, so I wouldn't know.
She does, y'all.
I
You
really
hate
do.
musicals? What?
I hate them. I hate them so
I know.
much.
Now you guys can't be friends anymore. I've been keeping that information.
Oh, no. This podcast is over.
I like Wicked, but that's the only one I've ever liked.
You don't like Hamilton?
No,
So if you had a
You
giant
went to
button on your
Hamilton.
iPad,
I didn't go to Hamilton. Sorry.
what did you just...
It's okay.
You went to Dickinson.
Yeah,
What's Dickinson?
it's a college
Oh.
in Pennsylvania.
Oh, I thought you went to Hamilton, like the show.
Oh yeah, no, I
I just
definitely.
got confused there.
It's okay.
Sorry.
I would never go to Hamilton the musical.
All right, so you do not have a giant button that says musicals.
No.
You would not vocalize at all.
I'd be very quiet.
We could turn them on in order to help you learn. All done.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. All done, all done, all done, all done. I would learn so quickly. So,
Not even West Side Story.
oh gosh, no. I will go if I know someone in the musical. I will go and support them, but I do not have a good time.
Well, Bye Bye Birdie.
None, 0 guys. I only liked Wicked. That's the only one I've ever seen.
How about Godspell?
No, I've never
What
even
about
seen it.
Newsies?
It's not going to happen. It's not
Have you
happening.
seen Newsies?
Spam-A-Lot.
No, it's not happening. So what they did is they wanted baseline to look like what it would look like in a typical learning environment if the participant was requesting preferred items prior to the speech generating device experience.
Yeah.
So they had the preferred target item was in front of the participant, just beyond the reach of them. That's like the worst. That's happening right now at the table right now with us and popcorn and Diana. She can't quite reach the popcorn, but
It's also super loud to chew.
yeah.
You're going to
And
knock
so-
over all the microphones to get to it.
I could block the attempts to reach for the item, and I would only start this session if the participant appeared to be interested in the item. So if Diana wasn't reaching for the caramel popcorn that is slightly out of reach, I wouldn't run the session. I would postpone it until we saw some relevant EOs in place.
So if you were just sitting there and we played your favorite musicals on the TV and you just got up and walked away,
Yeah, you
gotta
wouldn't-
start that. We got to wait a little bit.
Right, yeah. I will never sit there.
We'll wait a couple of years till you decide everything else. You've satiated on it all. All that's left for
Awesome.
musicals.
Right. So we have the preferred target item right out of reach, and then the interventionist would place the iPad displaying that Go Talk page of the big button directly in front of the participant, between the participant and the preferred item, and then they just waited to see what happened. So any independent speech generating device response that activated the speech output, so you have to hit it hard enough, you have to hit the right spot, within 5 seconds was immediately reinforced with that highly preferred item. But if no response occurred or an incorrect response occurred, the interventionist physically prompted the response. So they always received the highly preferred item. But if the participant initiated a target vocal word or an approximation without an SG response, the SG response was still physically prompted and reinforced.
Yep.
Because here they're only looking at, can you hit that button right here. And then the trial ended after reinforcement was delivered. And that's all they did. They did not prompt or reinforce vocalizations during baseline. That's what they did first. Then they looked at intervention phase 1, where they added a reinforcer delay and differential reinforcement along with the speech generating device. So this was the exact same as baseline, except that if the participant vocally emitted the full target word with or without the speech-generating device response during 5 seconds, reinforcement was delivered immediately. If the participant initiated a target vocal approximation during the 5 seconds but did not emit an SG response, the intervention prompted the SG response and then delivered the highly preferred item following the prompted response. But if there was no response within 5 seconds, the SGD response was physically prompted, and these, without vocalizations, were not immediately reinforced. So they had a 5-second delay before reinforcement was provided.
Shaggy, can you say that just one more time, like super succinctly? Because I think that's one of the areas I know when I was reading it, it felt like there were a lot of branching.
Right. So
pathways.
basically,
I thought you were going to quote the Lego movie when it's like, I think I got it, but say it all again.
I wasn't listening.
Oh, Lego movies. So basically, reinforcement was provided immediately, contingent on a full target word, with or without an SG response during that 5 seconds, or a target vocal approximation during the 5 seconds, but did not emit an SGD response.
Gotcha.
So vocalizations with or without the SGD response, full word, immediate reinforcement, target word with SGD immediate reinforcement, target word without SGD was prompted SGD and then immediately provided the high preferred reinforcement. With the SGD alone, you have that 5-second delay.
And then, if they emitted the target vocalization, they got it.
Yep.
But if they didn't, then they did a distractor trial and they got the low preferred.
Right. Yeah.
So it was really contingent on production of the target vocalization.
Right. The
At the
full
end
word.
of it all.
Yeah. The full
Or
word.
even any
Or the
of it.
approximation.
Or the approximation plus the SGD.
Yeah.
For Slinky,
response.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But if you are just hitting the iPad button, you're not getting iPad. You have to at least say,
Yeah.
to get it.
Yep.
So there really is a differential reinforcement component here towards the vocalizations.
Right. Responses were reinforced with the highly preferred item only if they consisted of either an independent full target vocal word or an independent vocal approximation paired with that SGD response. So there we are there. So if participants scored a 90% independent on those vocalizations or higher across 4 consecutive sessions, then they rocked it. If they did not, they went to phase 2. And phase 2 was just the addition of the echoic prompt after the delay. So everything happened the same, but the interventionist provided an echoic prompt, the vocal model, if the participant did not make that independent vocalization before or up to 5 seconds after the SGD response occurred.
Yeah.
That's all
Which
that
was
happened.
the question I had when I read phase 1. I was like, well, did they give them a model?
No.
I was like, oh, I guess the speech device gave the model.
Right.
Yeah.
Which it did, but if that wasn't effective, then they added
the interventionist real person model. If the participant did not imitate the model, they did the distractor trial, and then they provided the less preferred item contingent on the response. Pretty much the same, except they just added that real live prompt.
Yeah.
And one thing I do love too is that they did generalization probes throughout baseline intervention and post-intervention when the SGD was not present to see if independent vocalizations would be emitted in the absence of the device. They also did procedural integrity, and you know how much I love procedural integrity. It's like one of my favorite things. They did great. They had really high, 98% was the lowest mean integrity score.
Wow.
Yeah, I love it.
So they used a non-concurrent multiple baseline design across participants, and they really did. And they staggered their baselines prior to starting the study. So they randomly assigned participants before the experiment to how many baseline sessions they would have, which I think is nice.
Although the baseline rates were all really low. So.
Yeah, it didn't really matter, but it's nice when that happens.
Yeah. And you're able to stick to it because your baseline looks
horrible.
Ready for interventions.
Yeah. So across all participants, Addie, Ricardo, Adolfo, and Derek, when we're looking at the percentage of trials with independent or prompted vocalizations, we see very low levels in baseline. Really, Addie had 0. Derek had 0. Adolfo had 1 session at the end, which is so sad because it's the end, the last session in baseline. That's at 10%.
Yeah.
And Derek had variable responding between 0 and 30% of independent or prompted vocalizations in baseline, but fairly low.
Yeah.
And across the board in the generalization phase, it was 0 for everyone. So we had a place to start.
Yeah. Nowhere to go but up.
Yeah. And then during phase 1, we see variable rates of responding across the participants. Derek did not show a significant increase in responding or independent or prompted vocalizations during phase 1. It was slightly higher, but really basically the same level as baseline. And again, in his generalization probe, saw 0%. But Adolfo rocked it.
Totally rocked it.
He really rocked it. So during phase 1, his rates of independent or prompted vocalizations increased dramatically to 80% and stayed high throughout 4 sessions. And his generalization probe was also around 80%, which is pretty amazing. So they did not go to phase 2 for Adolfo. Ricardo saw similar rates as in baseline, as in 0 in phase 1. So the differential reinforcement and reinforcement delay.
I just fell on my foot and it freaked me out. It's a fluttery feel.
Oh, okay. So with Ricardo, we saw similar rates to baseline, 0. So obviously here, the differential reinforcement and 5-second delay was not effective as an intervention yet. And Addie saw increased rates during phase 1 with an immediate increase of 60%, moving all the way up to 90% at the end. And her generalization probes also increased as well. So she had 100% of trials with independent or prompted vocalizations on her last generalization probe. Or it's a guy.
It's a boy.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm thinking of the American...
Addie is generally a girl's name. So
I'm thinking of the American Girl doll Addie. That's why
Uh-huh.
I'm saying it, because I've been thinking about American Girl dolls lately. And so...
Their vocalizations never increase,
They
no matter
don't.
the intervention.
No. And so that's funny that I thought that. But Derek moved on to phase 2, where we see independent vocalization and prompted vocalizations. Independent vocalizations really don't change all that much from baseline, but prompted vocalizations are on an increasing trend, which is nice. Generalization probes are still at 0%. When we go back to phase 1, we again see nothing really has changed for him, unfortunately. So procedure was not effective for him at increasing independent or prompted vocalizations, unfortunately.
Yeah. But he's still using the speech generating device.
But he's still using the speech generating device.
So he has a way to functionally communicate. It's just we're not seeing increase in the vocalizations paired with it.
Yeah. And Ricardo also moved to phase 2 and saw an immediate increase in independent responses up to, around 90%, with only 3 sessions, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then when we returned to phase 1, he was at...
the thing he was asking for? Was he the one asking for iPad?
He was the one asking for iPad,
Which makes perfect sense. I was thinking about that because if your device is saying iPad, and you're like, well, I can't say I or P. Right? Maybe getting that model of the actual model versus the whole word iPad would just made all the difference. It's like, that's all you need from me. I know how to say
Yeah.
So totally makes sense.
Yeah. And then when they return to phase 1, he's at 100% of trials with independent or prompted vocalization, as well as in the generalization probe.
Yeah.
So
it's actually quite beautiful.
Yeah.
Data set there.
That's really nice. We do see phase 1 and phase 2 were effective at increasing either prompted or independent vocalizations for 3 out of our 4 participants here, suggesting that speech generating devices paired with another procedure could also increase those independent vocalizations for children with limited vocal imitation skills. Yeah. Another thing that they looked at, if you remember, was looking at the percentage of trials with vocal initiations. So those are those vocalizations before the SGD output. We don't really see any for Derek across all baseline phase 1 or phase 2. When we look at Adolfo's graph, we do see an increasing trend up to 60% of trials with vocal initiations before the output. And Ricardo rocks it at 100%, between 80 and 100% following the reintroduction of phase 1. So we do see a lot of vocal initiations for him. And then we see, a slight increasing trend for Addie, where was at 0% and at the end was around, 30% of vocal initiations before the SGD output. And they also did one more thing where they looked at the percentage of trials with independent full words or prompted full words for Derek specifically. And what they found is that they never saw independence with the full words, but they did see an increase of trials with prompted full words during phase 2. Mm-hmm. He was responding, just not independently.
Yeah. So given...
There's probably some more things they could do for Derek,
Yeah. So it could be for Derek, too, that the target responses were not under the control of motivating operations. That, you know, it's possible that that may have played a role. We don't know. Yeah. But it's something that could have happened.
That's where I would start, is by looking at what was the reinforcer here, to see if they could pick one that has a little more strength to it. Right.
And maybe, Derek did in phase 2 imitate the instructor's vocal model more frequently than the speech output. Mm-hmm. So maybe the speech output wasn't as reinforcing, potentially.
Or salient.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that they could look at.
Yeah, definitely.
I think here they really want to highlight, teaching multiple equivalent communication topographies can help. Mm-hmm. So if your speech generating device isn't working, maybe you can add in some prompts. Maybe you can add in some differential reinforcement. Maybe you can add in some echoic modeling so that you have not only the speech generating device, but also some sort of approximation as well.
And, both of these studies focus on increasing vocal speech in conjunction with using additional AAC, but that's not really for everyone. There are many individuals for whom AAC is their primary means of communication, and they're quite good at it and able to produce, many different complex requests and comments using AAC. So we're not trying to downplay the utility of it or what a great system it can be. I think the nice thing about these studies is that they're just looking at combinations of ways that we can apply this in our field. So that's why we chose these two specifically to look at.
Right.
But it could be for Derek that AAC is something that really works well for him, and they could continue to focus on increasing the complexity of the system that he's using and the types of things that he's able to request and say using his SGD, and that would be just fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think the common topography thing really is that when your speech generating device isn't available, how can you talk and communicate to others? But, I mean, that doesn't happen often, hopefully.
Hopefully not, but then again, I know that can be a problem sometimes if it's on an iPad and it's not charged and everyone's trying to charge theirs at the same time, and then suddenly you don't have any means of communication. That can be scary for some people if that really is your only way to communicate, and then the power goes out or something.
Yeah. So I think it's a nice little overview of what you can do with AAC. Mm-hmm. And how you can use AAC not only as your primary means of communication, but also as a way to facilitate vocalization.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think that leads us into our general discussion section, dissemination station. Actually, kind of leads me to a question I have. So let's go there. There we go. I was waiting for that. It's not dissemination station without a sound effect. Given our second article, should we be looking more closely as practitioners at adding in differential reinforcement or the modeling for our students who use AAC devices, specifically the speech generating devices? Should this be a part of regular practice? Should this be saved more for students who are not vocalizing to the extent that we would expect them to be vocalizing? Is this something just as a more limited case usage? What do you both think?
I hadn't thought about requesting or requiring a vocalization when using a speech generating device before. And I think that's why I have in the past always gravitated towards an actual symbolic picture exchange system, because I think it more easily lends itself to pausing and giving the opportunity for the vocal imitation of the receiver of the strip. So I've always liked it for that reason. And I, generally when you see AAC on a device being used, that people don't pause and require the eye contact or give the opportunity for the vocal attempt. But there's no reason that you can't.
No.
And this study demonstrates that.
Right.
So I think it is a great idea to build in that opportunity. And it would be certainly up to the practitioners and the caregivers to decide if they wanted to do the differential reinforcement piece,
right,
or just provide the opportunity for the attempt.
Right. One nice thing about speech generating devices is that the word sounds the same each time.
Yeah.
So, you will be out, you won't have to worry about therapists that have different, what are they called?
Accents.
Yeah, accents, or how you say words differently. So, I say milk. Some people say milk.
Some people say
Those sounded
milk.
exactly the same to me.
Oh, good.
No, they did not.
But
Stop it.
So
you say vanilla, and
right.
I say vanilla.
Right.
You remember that song?
No.
Okay.
But
From Annie, Get Your Gun.
That's why I probably don't know it.
No, it's not.
It's not?
What is it? Let's call the whole thing.
No,
off.
that's not.
Oh,
Annie,
I
Get
do
Your Gun.
actually know that song.
I'm thinking of Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better.
Oh,
yeah. I actually do know that song that you were talking about.
Okay.
But I knew about tomato and tomato.
Potato. Potato.
Yeah.
You go for oysters and I go for oysters.
Yeah. But that's nice. That's one way that you always know that everyone's saying everything the same.
True.
Is that the speech generating device helps you.
And the voices on the devices are getting so much better.
I love them now. They're not scary anymore.
No, they're not like robotic voices. You can pick like a child, like a male child or female child, or a male adult, female adult. And I think you can give it different accents on some versions.
Yep.
It's really nice, and you can pick a voice. I think that I want to say that you can allow some devices or some programs to listen to the vocalizations that the individual does have, and they'll match it up with the closest voice that they have.
That's nice.
Which is really awesome. I just that is a lovely idea to me, that this is maybe what they would sound like.
Yeah.
If they could say the words. So
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I know that I always preferred the speech generating device, only because it could be programmed. You can't lose things.
Yeah, you can just snap a picture
and
with
put it
the
in.
iPad and then add the picture right in. It can be the exact picture of the item
right
that's in question. We didn't talk too much about this. I sort of skimmed over it, but I have had many students get really bogged down on the phase 3 component of PECS, which is the discrimination component. So they may be doing a rock star job of handing over the picture, but when it comes time to discriminate, did you actually mean you wanted chips versus a paperclip, or did you mean you wanted chips versus Cheetos, that they don't have the background or the skills yet to discriminate between those pictures, and you really start to see the whole system break down. Right. And that can be due to a number of factors, but if you have the opportunity to have the actual picture of the item versus the Mayor Johnson pictures can be...
They're hard to recognize sometimes.
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Obscure? Is
they
that
are
the right
sometimes
word?
obscure because they're line drawings.
Yeah,
right.
So sometimes those can be difficult for people to learn what they mean if they don't seem that related to the actual item that you're requesting. So running into those discrimination problems with PECS sometimes some of those could be alleviated by moving straight to a speech device without the cumbersome aspect of having to take a picture, print it out on your computer, and then laminate it and Velcro
Right.
it and put it in the book.
And then get lost.
And
like
then
in like
immediately
1
get
second.
lost. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then need to possibly make multiple copies of that picture, so you have, this is the one
Yep.
for school, this is the one for a different classroom, this is the
Mhm.
one that should be at home, or
Right.
parents have to make their own and hope they look the same. But just because you Google image search something doesn't
Yep.
mean you're gonna find the exact same bag of Cheetos.
Yeah. So that's one reason I like to use more high tech, is because it seems a little easier.
Yeah,
in
it's
a
a little
Yeah.
more streamlined.
Right.
I have also worked with individuals who don't yet have picture-to-object discrimination. Using the symbols at all don't really have meaning for them. But for those individuals, we were able to either use, it was mostly food that we were working on, but either use packaging from the food, or
Right.
remember when those, I don't know if they're still that popular, but those little mini erasers they're like eraser puzzles, and they were
Oh.
like all the different foods. There was like a milkshake one and a French fry one and a hamburger one. You know what I'm talking about?
No, but that's okay.
They're cute, but they're tiny, so it was like dollhouse food kind of things. So we used those too, and we would have the little bitty like hamburger picture on a card and use that to exchange.
Oh. That's
With a
smart.
physical
Yeah.
object.
Yeah, it was actual physical
Oh.
object, so it
That's
wasn't a
very
picture.
smart.
It was
Cool.
an object. It was just a miniature object. Yeah, and that's something that you would be able to do with a modified PECS system, but might be more difficult to do with an SGD.
Right.
So-
I like that. That's clever.
Yeah, I know.
Very nice.
Cool.
Well, everyone, I think episode 22 on augmentative and assisted communication systems is coming to a close. For those of you who are listening to apply for CEs, our second code word is snowflake. Keeping with our winter theme, every snowflake is different, just like every AAC device could potentially be different. Snowflake.
But not the PECS protocol. That should be the same.
Yeah, well, that's one snowflake in the blizzard of AAC devices.
Ooh, I love
Like
that.
that.
Ooh.
Call me Frost Bondi.
Awesome.
Did
Well-
you do that because Frost?
No, I just thought of that about a second ago.
Oh,
Yeah, I wish I were that. I'm not that quick.
I like that though.
Diana and Jackie, thanks so much for coming to talk about AAC devices. I know it was frequently emailed, so I'm glad we were able to make it happen.
Yeah.
It's a good topic. I'm glad we got to talk about it too.
Thanks, everyone.
For those of you who have enjoyed the show, please review us on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you'd like to get a new episode every other week, including some hilarious preview episodes in between our full research-based episodes, I think they're hilarious because, I think we're pretty great. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter as ABA Inside Track. You can email us, just like those listeners did to ask for this topic, at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. Am I missing anything else?
No, you do a
That's
great
all
job with
that's
that.
all our social media presences. And if you haven't checked out the Facebook page, please do so, because we've been putting up a lot of interesting either videos or pictures or articles. And if you have anything that you'd like to post, please feel free to do so, because it can only help build our community of behavior analysts.
Cool.
Well, Jackie, I know that you have a plug you'd like to plug in.
I would love to tell everyone about an awesome ABA program at Regis College. So if you are interested in the field of applied behavior analysis, you can...
You probably are.
Yeah, you probably are because you're listening.
If you made it this far into the show.
Yeah, right. You should check out Regis College's Master's in Science of Applied Behavior Analysis program. We have full-time and part-time options. You get to work with me and a lot of other cool PhD-level faculty members and do some great research. So check us out, regiscollege.edu.
Beautiful. Well, everyone at home, thanks for listening. Jackie and Diana, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Rob.
All right, everyone. Well, our episode has come to a close, but we'll be back next week with our preview episode and then our full-length episode Thanks so much for listening. And until next time, keep responding. Bye.
See ya!